And we are back for the hormones of the male reproductive system. So when it comes to hormones, first of all, we need to indicate the fact that gender is genetically determined at conception. So when mom and dad's gametes come together, this is when we know if we have two X's or an X and a Y. Okay, so we could also say there is a fertilization. So same idea. Two X chromosomes, we have female, and X and Y, we have male in terms of gender, but the development and functioning of the system is much more complex. Than just two chromosomes coming together. You know, we have the TDF gene, the testes determining factor gene has to kick in. The TDF gene after 7 weeks development starts the production of testosterone, and so the fetus, the embryo, gets bathed in testosterone that is released by this particular gene turning on, and therefore we start to get things like primary sex characteristics. And there are also some cognitive changes that are happening because of this hormone. Now, depending on how much of this hormone is produced, and how much the testes determining factor gene kicks in, we can see several changes that can happen to a fetus. You can have male characteristics that don't develop fully. You can have an intersex, or what people call hermaphrodite, where sort of the glans clitoris starts to extend but not as much, where the testes start to drop but they don't. So there's all sorts of things that can happen with the amount of testosterone that is released during this time and what effects it can have, right? And don't forget that the primary sex characteristics here, we're talking about genitals, okay? So then at puberty, we have another set of sort of rush of hormones that is going to happen at puberty. We saw that with spermatogenesis. But at puberty, the hypothalamus secretes one of his RHs, one of the releasing hormones called GnRH. And GnRH stands for gonadotropin releasing hormone. So we know that it's an RH, it's a releasing hormone, but what does it affect? It affects the gonadotropin. And so what it does is it tells the pituitary, the anterior pituitary, to start secreting gonadotropins. Gonadotropins, we know, are FSH and LH. Follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Those are the two hormones that fall under the same category called gonadotropins. Okay? And let's see what these hormones do. What color was I using? Blue. So let's go purple. So FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. So what this hormone is responsible for is to start that spermatogenesis. So it gives rise to the male meiosis. And so what we do is we have sperm production. Okay, so that's what FSH does. LH, luteinizing hormone. Instead, stimulates a different part of the testes. So if this one right here stimulates the seminiferous tubules, because that's where sperm is made, then luteinizing hormone over here, since what it does, I used a little star, what it does is it stimulates testosterone production. Then we know that it has an effect on the interstitial cells in the testes, because those interstitial cells, those cells in between those tubules, that's where testosterone is being made. Okay. Now, the way that I want to show you how all of these hormones, sort of all of this whole process comes into play, is with one of those feedback systems that we saw in the endocrine system. So what we're going to say is we're going to do feedback system for male hormones. All right, so the whole thing we said starts with the hypothalamus. The mechanism by which puberty is triggered is still largely undiscovered. There are certain things that we do know. We do know that it deals a little bit with melatonin levels. Scientists know that right before puberty hits, your melatonin levels drop by about 75%. And so that it's something that maybe triggers the hypothalamus to start releasing GnRH. But some of those mechanisms are still largely unknown. And so the hypothalamus, we know it's going to secrete GnRH. That has an effect on the anterior pituitary. And so the anterior pituitary is then going to secrete FSH and LH, which are the two hormones. So I'm using all the hormones in green and all the glands in orange, okay? And so then they both have an effect on the testes, different parts of the testes though, right? So here I'm gonna say seminiferous tubules. Here I'm gonna say interstitial cells. And as a result, here I get sperm production, and here I get testosterone. And we know that testosterone is responsible for secondary sex characteristics, but testosterone is also responsible for speeding up, for increasing. So it has a positive effect on the testes so that you produce more sperm, okay? So that's what kind of effect those guys will have. And then when testosterone levels are high, what happens is when I have too much testosterone, then what ends up happening is the system shuts down, okay? So when testosterone levels are too high, then sort of the system shuts down. I shut it down at the hypothalamus, and obviously the pituitary is going to also shut down in that sense when we have too much testosterone. Okay, so when you have too much of it, it's going to shut down the system. Now, how do I know when I have too much sperm being produced? Well, the hypothalamus doesn't have eyes in the gonads to know. So what happens is, together with the production of sperm, what FSH does is it causes the production of another hormone called inhibin. Now, inhibin, the only function that it has is to shut off sperm production. So when I have too much inhibin, when inhibin accumulates in the system, then the inhibin will shut off the system. Okay. So too much inhibin will let the body know that there is enough sperm being produced. Okay. So inhibin then, like I said, it's only, that's the function that it has, whereas testosterone has two functions. At a certain low level, testosterone will increase sperm production, but if there is too much of it, what ends up happening, it is actually affects the system negatively and it shuts the whole thing down, okay? So if you take too much anabolic steroids, which mimic testosterone, what can happen is you're actually shutting down the system. So, pumping yourself full of testosterone is going to shut down this system. You're not going to have any sperm production. And because sperm production is halted, then what happens is the testes begin to shrink. And so what you start having is, I'm trying to think of the word now, and it totally escaped my mind. I'm having a brain fart as we speak. You can have, it's not going to come to me. So anyway, so these are the hormones of the male reproductive system. So you have the GnRH that gets everything, testicular atrophy. Haha, it did come to me. So it is when the testes shrink, it's called testicular atrophy. And so that can happen when you have too much testosterone in your system. Okay, so you don't want to be pumping yourself full of testosterone for bodybuilding, for example. Okay, so these are the hormones. So we're going to start hypothalamus, which gets the whole thing started with GnRH. Remember that hormones are communicators. They're the little pigeons, right? The little communication, the little male pigeons. So then GnRH tells the pituitary, okay, we're good to go. Let's start with puberty. And the pituitary says, okay, we're going to need some sperm and we're going to need some testosterone. And then the FSH tells the testes, so okay, let's make some sperm. The LH tells the testes, okay, let's make some testosterone. When there's too much, that system is shut off. And then together with sperm, we're making inhibin. When there's too much inhibin, we have enough sperm and that system is shut off. All right, so I hope that these all make sense in terms of males, and we're gonna come back tomorrow or Wednesday with the female reproductive system, and I'll see you then. Okay, bye-bye.